Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to be back. Talk with you tonight about what's going on at City Hall and overall get feedback from you about what needs to be done in the city of Galion. One of the first things I want to talk about, and if you are in the neighborhood where some of the streets are being prepared for paving, you've seen that the milling of a handful of streets, and I guess there's a graphic up there you can take a look at, has begun, and then obviously the next step is the paver will come in and begin to do some paving. A couple things of note: I happened to be at the bank the other day, and a daughter of a woman who is an original homesteader, if you will, on the wood streets, ash, pine, oak, that neighborhood back there. And she said that she had the original assessment from when the street was put in, when her house was first built, and it was about 60 years old. So I'm glad we're getting it done. And I guess, an old timer might say, well, they don't make asphalt the way they used to, but that's been kind of a low volume street without much truck traffic. And you get an idea of how much longer a surface can go based on the type of traffic, and candidly, without picking on Columbus Street, where we're doing a section there where you have those beautiful tree-lined streets. The shade shades the pavement, and if you hadn't noticed, or if you already knew that, I don't mean to be insulting, but that's why some of those streets you don't get the durability on. So Oak and Ash should start out as a brand new subdivision with small trees, and so you get an idea of how long it can last. The other factor, obviously, are the trucks, and that goes to why we went with concrete pavement, particularly on the southern part of Portland Way South, and so anyways, there's the paving list. We're hitting some of the worst targets. Really under $300,000, which is a little bit less than the last few years. So once we get this completed, it's more than likely we'll take a second look at streets that didn't make the cutoff. I know we had a question a couple of weeks ago about North Market. You'd have to not be getting around town not to recognize and know from Hetrick out to about Magnolia Terrace and maybe those Buckeye Apartments out there. It's pretty uneven, and there's some other sections that we might, depending on how the rest of the revenue for the year goes, might be able to do a little bit more paving. So that's underway. Talk a little bit about the parks. You may have some questions about why the slide isn't open at Heist Park. Upon inspection, we found that some deterioration, which we honestly knew needed to have an eye kept on it, had really got a bit ahead of us, and so a joint decision was made not to open it until we could have some parts fabricated and get some qualified welders in there to make sure the new metals are joined in a way that preserves the safety of any kids or older kids that want to go down that slide. So it's a little bit disappointing, but obviously you want to be put safety first. So we're counting on one of the newer industries in town. Mosier Industrial is going to help fabricate the parts, and they have a number of welders, and they've agreed to go out there and once the parts are fabricated, get that back in service for us. So, but the pool's been open, and it's been in active use. You go through Heist Park, you'll see that's as always, it's one of the recreational areas. It's a real high point here in Galion. We're about, every time I give a date, I feel like the king of jinxing it, but we're a number, maybe 2 or 3 weeks away from a couple of new toys, new water features out at the Splash Park. We're excited to see that, and it's a giraffe, and if you've been out there, there's really only one water gun, and so it's kind of lonely out there. So we're going to have another one installed that looks like Nemo from the cartoon movie. So it'll be fun, and again, that's really been designed for kind of the under 10 crowd, and and so we're excited to see how the new toys work. And we'd always planned to add to it as finances allowed, and as people, it seems like people, especially kids, want something new, and so we're going to try to make all the people who utilize that have something new to look forward to out there. So on the Heist Park playground, we're bumping along. It's August was the last delivery date on the toys, the playground equipment itself. So unfortunately, it'll be in the fall of the year before that gets up and running. So there's probably a couple people in our office that are especially disappointed, and we're disappointed for everybody who's been looking forward to it. But we're going to continue to work away, and once it's built, it'll be something that when it comes to park assets, it's something that we'll all be real proud of. So, that's what I have for intro. I don't know if there are any questions.
Not yet. If anybody would like to ask anything tonight, please submit it now.
Yeah, I would switch gears a little bit and talk about what I think will happen tomorrow night at council. The most, in my view, important, although I'm probably going to regret describing it that way, but it'll be a final reading on the Port Authority ordinance, the idea of forming a Port Authority to be a focal point or an entity, organizational entity, that can really spearhead economic development in the community and allow us to take on some of the bigger projects that I think, although there's been no formal planning process, I think what we're focused on are priorities that most everyone in town feels like are things we need. For instance, and this might be, no particular order, but we need an industrial park. We need a place to be able to bring new industry to the town. There are ways in which a Port Authority will play a leading role in making that happen. I'm in the camp that thinks we need a new grocery store, an additional grocery store from what we have, and I'm hopeful that the Port Authority can play the leading role in getting a new facility built that meets the needs of young families and older families both in the community. And then finally, maybe one of the big projects, but by no means the main reason that the port's being formed, is to have an entity that can design and build and operate a major sports complex that I think there's maybe a difference of opinion among some people. I think those people who are maybe not in favor of the Freeze Center, I'd like to think that most of them haven't heard enough about it, and I think of the people who are a little bit ambivalent about it, that given the facts and the explanation of what it can do for both wellness here for people in the community, but also as an attraction and economic development tool, I think as it's all said and done, that you'll see support for that. So those three initial priorities, I think, are very important for a port, and the kind of thing that Galion can use to get competitive in terms of bringing new industry to town, and an entity that can acquire real estate and manage property in a way that the city is really not set up to do. So that's that is likely to be the biggest issue, in my view, the most consequential issue of tomorrow night's city council meeting. So,
okay.
Matt, you got a question?
Yeah, more of a discussion topic than anything, but this one came from Dawn. She said, whoever owns the former East School building needs to step up and do maintenance and mow, or just remove it.
Yeah, it's been owned by the same property owner for quite a while. The property owners, I guess I'm going to give an explanation. Maybe it sounds like an alibi, but they're busy running a business that's been kind of in a growth mode lately. My opinion, it's not speaking for the company that owns it, but it's one of those things that I they may wish they didn't have. And the tearing down of the building is a pretty big lift, pretty big endeavor. So I, like you, Don, wished it. I don't see any future use for it, and I'm not sure. I've never heard anyone give an estimate on the demolition, but no BS. It's probably several $100,000 to demolish that building. It's not what you asked, but I'll give you an example of how the cost of demolition can be enough to, knock the wind out of you. The old Pico building at the corner of Brant Road and 598, the estimate on demolishing that's $600,000. So you look at that East School, it's built. It'll be like the high school. You go to tear it down, you'll have trouble. It'll break the wrecking ball. It's a stout old building, but I'm not sure it has much future use in it, and there's no denying that it's a bit of an eyesore sitting right there on East Street. So I think what I've done is not answered her question very well, and I'm almost certain that I've, if you'll accept the expression, pissed off the owner. So we'll hear about that in the morning. And I guess I thank you for the question. It's a tough nut, cost a lot of money, and I'm not sure there really isn't a plan at this point to tackle that and get that out of the way, or get it demolished, whatever its future holds.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. No questions yet.
Yeah, Don, that's, I don't know. I feel kind of bad about the answer, but it's nothing that, let's say, $500,000 wouldn't take care of, and that might be a low estimate because there's quite a bit of playground and foundation that building's built on. So anyway, that's on that particular topic. Anything else?
D had a follow-up comment. We all need to keep our properties mowed.
Yeah, I agree. I happen to be in my our properties happen to be mowed right now, so I'll bang the table and say, yeah, I agree. It is, what I've learned from this perspective is that there are a lot of different circumstances. I don't disagree that and when there's a large property that isn't mowing adjacent to a neighborhood, I get it, and I think Eric Baldinger, somebody asked a question a couple weeks ago or made a comment. I actually think he's working pretty hard on top of it, trying to show some judgment. But as I drive around town, I think accepting a few properties that look probably just as bad on the inside as the outside, that they're making a dent, and the contractor that we've hired to mow is pretty darn busy, as one could imagine. Nothing else?
Not as of right now.
Okay, let me see. Up and coming. This might get, if there's anyone listening, this will get provoked and maybe misconstrued. We made a decision here in the office to fill a supervisor position right now, and since we've been here, really for a while previous to that, the same individual was a superintendent of both the water plant and the sewer plant. And you look at that guy's tenure and a lot of other factors, and we made a decision to fill a water superintendent. And as we've begun talking with people, what we've realized is that our pay scale for our supervisory positions is really out of step and quite a bit below other communities, not suburban communities, not affluent communities in Delaware County, but other communities such as ours, similar population, similar average income or median income. And so I'm going to initiate a conversation with City Council about what we can do to move up some of those pay scales. And so when you start to look at the numbers, I know for certain that there'll be a negative reaction among certain people, but we're out of fiscal emergency now, and we want to be both prudent with the money that we have. But one of the best ways, in my view, to be prudent with the money is to have good managers. And that you'll sometimes see in a debate like a discussion about how much to pay the police chief or the fire chief or the person that's running the wastewater plant. I think what you'll see is that we're not really competitive with other cities. So as this discussion begins to happen, we're going to do some data research and try to make sure that if we want to have top managers, that we're going to have to pay them comparably to other communities in the area, other communities our size. So, for everybody who makes less than what these new proposed salaries are, make less than what our managers are currently making, their reaction might be, they're already making enough. But the reality is, as many of the people on this little list that I have are very close to retirement, and we need to begin to think as a city about making sure that we have new managers coming in, and the only way to be able to do that is to have a competitive wage scale. So I think that will that'll bubble around in council, and I think it's a healthy debate, and I'm hopeful that we'll reach a consensus on having a wage rate for our chiefs and our top people that is competitive with other places. So if anybody's out there listening, that'll probably get an immediate reaction. Go ahead.
Next question tonight comes from Samantha. She asked about the East Side recycling bin. When do they empty it, and can it be emptied more often?
First of all, typical politician answer, it's not ours. It's not our fault. It is actually a county entity that does recycling and has the management of that lonely single trailer out there, which gets at what our beef has been for several years now, and we've not been very successful in getting the attention of the county recycling facility and their people, and that is that we need another location, or we need another major trailer at East Park or wherever the best place for it is. So you're right, and no, they're going to come on their schedule. When the answer you're suggesting come a couple times a week, that'd be one answer. My thought would be spot another trailer, because everyone in town who recycles knows that if you don't get there before the end of the weekend, you're either putting your cardboard back in your truck or your car, or you're stuffing it in, or probably the worst of all, you're just letting it pile up there. So I think all of the above happen, and the answer is to get another trailer, and we'll continue to bug them. We have not, I think, we probably haven't been, we haven't complained enough about it and made the case to them. So I'll take that as a get off your butt and do something kind of question or comment from Samantha. Yeah, we need to address that.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Shauna. She asks, with all the storms we have been having, is there any chance of getting some of the older trees looked at so they don't cause more damage?
It's a good answer. First of all, I want to say a couple of things about that. Every once in a while, usually not when there's been a storm, you hear people talking about the local municipal electric and all kinds of exaggerations about whether it's good for the city or not. But when you have that kind of storm damage, you always have the potential for it. I think it tends to put that argument about whether or not we should be in the electric business. It kind of settles that. The ability of our team to respond. A few months ago, our guys played a instrumental role in getting Shelby back up and running when they had a candidly a lot more devastation than we had the other day. As to the trees, the ordinance on that, and this must be the night for all the answers that will make enemies and irritate people. But the ordinance now, under that ordinance, that tree is the property owner's. So if you have one of those great big old partially dead trees that you say somebody should take that down, let's call the city. The way the ordinance is now, it's like reporting on yourself. And we haven't gone out and been the tree inspectors. I think people have been here a long time. Remember when the sidewalk was a big craze and everybody had their sidewalk painted up, and then you had to fix it. It caused a lot of aggravation, a lot of stuff. That's your tree, and I'm well aware it costs several $1,000s to take that tree down. So really, if the remedy is to have the city come by and take those trees down to avoid either property damage or to avoid them falling on an electric line, then we're going to need to change the ordinance. And so because there are so many trees, we estimated about 2 years ago looking at this issue, because every time you have a storm it comes up and people are refocused on kind of the underlying problem of, gee, that's kind of unsafe. What if something happens? It was well over $1 million. And that was on a list that somebody had started before I became mayor. So you look at those previously reported trees and make some guess about how many have been taken care of by the property owner. And it really is about $1 million to tackle it on the front end. And I've really never thought, once we added it up or multiplied it up and it was 7 figures, that it kind of killed our enthusiasm for making that an active priority. But my guess and experience would say it take that much to get the current backlog taken care of, and then you're going to have a recurring kind of process. The city spends about $125,000 a year with a tree trimming contractor to clear the power lines and reduce that risk. But we don't, honestly, we don't do, and everyone knows this, we don't do much of anything if it's not near a power line. So if that remains an issue, if people are concerned about it, then the best way to do it is to talk with council members and if you will, put some pressure on them to begin to put some resources that we can tackle these. Last thing I'd say, it's kind of a long answer, but it's $1 million problem, so it doesn't lend itself to a simple. I'm against taking electric fund dollars and taking that contractor and just cutting trees down in which there's the most remote or there's no chance that you'll see it fall on a power line. So out at Amons, where there are trees, the city's trees, we didn't use the electric fund to cut down those 50 or 60 trees that were cut down. So I think I don't want to see the electric department used to fund a bunch of tree trimming that really is not relevant to keeping the power on. So, but if it's a priority, it's a little bit, and I know there's another question, if it's a priority, it's a little bit like dilapidated housing. And if it's a priority, then we're going to have to put some of the limited city dollars into it, but you're not going to tackle it. There's no magic pool of funds, and in many situations, the property owner just doesn't have the resources to take care of one of those big, now dead ash trees or one of those oak trees that's aging and breaking into pieces. So anyway, hope that answers the question. It's a legislative matter, and I think I would work to try to free up some money and begin to tackle in some form or fashion some of the worst trees.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Randy. What's the timeline for the traffic signal at 598 and Brant Road?
A couple weeks ago, I said I'll be thankful if it's in by Thanksgiving, and I wasn't trying to be too jestful. It was like a bad joke probably, but anyway, it doesn't. It looks like that time of year, October, November. And again, to just repeat myself from other times we've had that question, it has to do with getting the poles ordered and the long lead time on the poles in which the traffic signal will be mounted. So designed, have a pretty good idea of the cost. Like everyone else, I'm excited to see that go in, and then followed in about a year and a half with the major widening, which will, I think, take care of the safety issues and the free flow of traffic issues that the traffic signal doesn't solve. The widening, I think, will go a long ways to meeting the kind of the needs both for commerce and for safety out there.
Okay, next question tonight comes from Jeremiah. He asks, is there a plan to repave Gill Avenue and replace the curves after Columbia Gas is done with the gas line project?
The Gill has gotten a lot of attention. We had, and where I would certainly, it seems like it's chewed up the most. I think we paved that 2 or 3 years ago, but definitely from Church to Harding Way, that section has gotten beat up. We had, the city had some stormwater issues that we cut the pavement for, and then Columbia Gas, they've done a major rehabilitation. But as I mentioned at the very outset, there's a probably $50,000 more, which maybe 1 or 2 streets at the most, that has been identified in the existing budget. And so we'll get this paving done, then we'll kind of go back and look at those worst targets. So I've been talking with Columbia Gas, those existing holes, like there's one in Heist Park, they're chasing a leak, I was told, but their contractor's coming in soon to take care of the most recent of those curb cuts, which are a pain in the neck, but I think their contractor generally does a pretty good job. But it seems like a waste when we just pave it and then it's cut up for a gas line replacement a year or 2 later. So, as I just said about the trees, we'll put it on the list, Jeremiah. No, seriously, we'll take a look, and there's a little bit going on, a little bit more money that will free up before the end of the year. So.
Okay, next question tonight comes from Tina. Jumping back to the tree issue, is there a way to bring back the tree trimming crew and get some of the trees around town cut down that way?
Well, the equipment's still there. We didn't sell the equipment, but it's inside of that question is what I was saying before. I'm not in favor of using either contractors or the old tree trimming crew. All those guys were always paid out of the electric fund. So when they were doing tree trimming that wasn't near electric lines, it was, I don't mean in a you're going to lock you up and you go to jail kind of way, but it was not the best use or misuse of electric funds. And with so much pressure on people and their family budgets and businesses and their corporate budgets because of the cost of power, if we bring it back, we would have to bring it back and fund it with what generally would be income tax fund in the general fund. It's a crew of 3, probably $220,000 a year out for 3 employees plus benefits. Then the other thing that we found, and it's worth reconsidering, I'm not saying no, is that unless those individuals, those tree trimmers, have commercial driver's license and are willing to plow snow during the winter, there are many days when in the past their activity was kind of limited. So if we were to bring them back, we would probably put it in the position descriptions that these would be CDL holders. And my guess is if that suggestion, which the more I think about it and try to answer the question, it's not a bad idea. Might even be the best idea of the night. that they would likely be in the street department of the service department. The equipment would probably be transferred over, but I don't see tree trimmers coming back in the line department. We get a lot of work done with the contractor, and I think we'll stay with that solution. But non-electric funded tree trimming, that's something we can talk about. We will talk about it and try to report back, or you can ask a question in a couple of weeks about what we found out. It's the idea of the night.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Sheila. Is the new grocery store coming or not?
I really don't know for sure. I've said a couple times, been waiting for this question. I said a couple times in the past few weeks, and then on these Facebook Live, that I'm getting discouraged about the prospect of a new grocery reopening in the Geyers property. And I sure as heck hope it happens, but I'm not as optimistic. And we begin looking at other options. I talked at the outset about the Port Authority. One of the things that I want the port to look at is some creative financing that might be able to fund a new facility, which I think would be more successful, more popular among Galionites, and the way to go versus hanging all of our hopes for additional grocery facility on the reopening of the 50-year-old Geyers facility. Other thing I wanted to say is, and I say this every time the question's asked, thank goodness for Drug Mart and I maybe don't say Save a Lot enough. So for a handful of different reasons, I've been Save a Lot 2 or 3 times since we did a last Facebook Live, and we got a grocery store. So it may not be everybody's favorite or whatever, or they may have one criticism or another, but if you haven't been out there, go out there. It's a grocery store. So I've been real pleased with it, and so I said to my wife, tonight, if the inevitable grocery store question comes up, I'm going to put in a plug for Save a Lot, and everyone in town who shops local for groceries knows the people at Drug Mart. So I'm not playing favorites, but I do want to say, it may not be located in the best place, and maybe we need to find some ways to make it easier for people to get to Save a Lot. But we have a grocery store. At the same time, we're working real hard on bringing something new in, which I think really the community deserves and will be the kind of thing that makes Galion a better place.
Okay, I don't see any other questions right now.
Well, it's probably time to wrap it up. I think to summarize, if we're going to have top flight people going forward, we're going to have to look at the wage scale for the heads of our departments. If you want to attract good people, you're going to have to compensate the rank and file, as they say. We'll soon be getting involved in union negotiations with the city's 4 unions. And I'd anticipate I hope that the kind of negotiations that happen are fair, and what I hope taxpayers and citizens realize is that a lot of these folks, men and women, were pretty dedicated. For the most part, they had nothing to do with what caused a fiscal emergency, and so we're going to try and negotiate in a fair way, and the same thing probably applies to your average firefighter or police officer or street worker, that when you look at their wages, we're really not where we perhaps should be. We're not in the middle of the pack, and so we're going to have to look at that seriously in order to retain good people and do it in a responsible way. And I'm not interested in gypping our city workers, because I think they're real important to us. And until you need an ambulance, you may not think they're important until you need your street plowed. You know, it's kind of, it's what are we paying these gals for, these guys for? But it'll be I think good to get these negotiations underway, contracts negotiated, so we can get on to the rest of the business. So anyways, without opening another carton of eggs, we'll say goodnight, and thanks for those people that were listening, and we're going to continue to work hard to do a good job for the city of Galion. Good night.